Welcome to the Irish Occupational Therapy Podcast. This series 3, is focused on using occupational therapy wisdom to support parents with their child's development. So we'll be exploring key areas such as sleep, feeding, toileting, play and communication with insights from experts in occupational therapy and other fields.
Our goal is to normalise the challenges of parenting and provide practical tips and advice. You'll hear from dedicated professionals who will share their expertise and personal experiences to help you navigate the complexities of raising children. Today on the Irish Occupational Therapy Podcast, we welcome Grace Magennis. Grace is an occupational therapist and play enthusiast from County Tyrone. Inspired by her own children, Grace founded the Sensory Submarine in 2021. What began as an online shop specialising in sensory resources has evolved and grown into a play-based business which encourages children to explore, develop everyday skills and expand their sensory horizons. The Sensory Submarine offer carefully planned and curated sensory play sessions, workshops and specialist programs for children of all ages and abilities, both in group and in one-to-one settings. Grace, you are very welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Aileen and Jen. I'm really excited. And I'm completely honoured to be asked, to be honest.
We're delighted to have you in. I'm saying I've been watching you on social media for a while and loving what you're doing, so it's great to have you.
Thank you.
Grace, can we start off just with a bit of background? Obviously, as an occupational therapist, play is our main focus, one of the child's main occupations. But tell us about the inspiration behind the very inviting play experiences that you offer.
Yeah, so the story of the Sensory Submarine is a wee bit long-winded, but I'll try to keep it as brief as I can. I graduated way back in 2010, so almost just over 14 years ago actually. And I worked in every area. I've worked with adults and kids in mental health, in learning disability, in community and in acute. But I always was drawn to working with children. I suppose growing up, I'm the eldest of 5, so I was always looking after the younger ones, playing with the younger ones, always playing with my younger cousins, and was always a real child. So I always really, really enjoyed working with children. Then whenever I had my own kids, they are now 6 and 7, I became completely obsessed with child development and with the importance of play. So I was very much one of these mummies that was making my own rattles, making my own sensory mats for the babies, really getting stuck in it. And there would have been a tough tray in my kitchen from the kids were 1.5. Much to my husband's despair, he would have been coming home and thinking, what has went on here? The place was a mess, but I loved it. My eldest son had a lot of sensory needs and sensory challenges. So the Sensory Submarine was born in 2021 whenever I started to look for resources to support him online. Alongside one of my best friends, actually, who's a pediatric OT as well. The two of us were doing it together at that point. And we were looking for things to support his oral sensory needs and to give him lots of tactile feedback. And one of the things that I found back then was it was very overwhelming as a parent. And trying to find resources or find out how to use things. There was lots of shops selling things, but nobody really telling you how you should support your child. So we set about initially with a mission to create a kit that sort of provided all the advice and tips around it as well. Initially, it was very much, we had 3 kits. We had an oral motor kit, a fine motor kit and a baby playtime kit. And those came with loads of fun toys and resources with accompanying advice and tips for parents to support them at home. And then I suppose as time went on, one of my best friends, she left the business. It just wasn't for her. We're still very good friends. We didn't fall out. And I carried it forward. But I was still working in the trust at the time. So it was very much just a wee side hustle at that stage. And my interest grew over time until about the end of 2021, I would say, or mid 2021, I had taken a bit of a career break. I was looking after my aunt who was terminally ill, and literally one of my biggest cheerleaders. And I suppose at that time, I reevaluated my life, essentially, and decided I wanted to be at home more with my own kids And I could also see through my own child how big a gap there was in terms of support from the NHS for children with additional needs. There was very little out there socially and very little out there in terms of play experiences in our local area. So I just took the leap in 2022 and left, with no massive plan as to where I was going with this. Some people would say I was crazy, but I knew I had a passion for it. I loved working with children, and I just gave it a go. And thankfully, I've been very lucky. It's grown very organically since. The Sensory Submarine, then, like, I started out doing one class a month for children with additional needs in our local area, and more people just said to me, like, we want to come. That turned into like 2 classes a month, and then it became 2 to 3 a week. So it grew very organically that way. And then I started having people asking me to see their kids for one-to-ones, and to give them ideas for things that they could be doing at home as well. So it's just grown really through word of mouth and through, like, I absolutely love it, and I get so much joy out of it. So that's kind of where it came from.
It sounds like it's really kind of grown gradually over a period of time, which is a really nice way to build up a business. I'm just wondering, you said about the role of play in relation to development, and I suppose as play can mean so many different things to different people. You mentioned sensory play, we sometimes talk about imaginative play, physical play. Could you just explain a little bit what, when we're talking about play, what that means and how it contributes to childhood development?
Yeah, so I think firstly it's really important to, like, acknowledge that all play is valid, because I think, like, sometimes we can have this idea in our heads of what play should look like for children, but as Aileen said at the start, play is a child's main occupation, and how they choose to play should very much be respected and embraced as well. Like, there's loads of different types of play. Like, the play that I probably spend most of my time on and most of my focus is on is around sensory play. And that's basically just any sort of play that's stimulating the senses, your sense of touch, your sense of hearing, your sense of taste, your visual senses. And it's really, really good for child development. Like, in most of the classes that I do are based around sensory play. So I might have different tough trays out and different things based around a theme. But through sensory play, we are promoting the development of fine motor skills. The kids are getting down, they're using their hands to manipulate objects, they're scooping, they're pouring, they're learning all of those really basic functional tasks through sensory play. It's also a really lovely way to support the development of their cognitive skills and their thinking skills. So, like, problem solving through play, they might measure out materials through play, and they're developing planning skills and that as well, through sensory play. I think sensory play is another lovely one in terms of developing emotional regulation skills. It's very calming, it's very regulating for a lot of children. And it also gives them loads of opportunities to express themselves and to play imaginatively and creatively without, like, really tight boundaries around it. So I think for me, sensory play is the one that I probably do the most. I've noticed with my own kids now who are that wee bit older, they're kind of growing away from the sensory play side of things now, much to my dismay. But they are definitely more into, like, construction based activities now, so, like, construction based play. And then I can see that developing, like, different skills. So, like, there's definitely a lot of, like, problem solving skills and figuring things out, whenever you're building blocks or magnet tiles, making sure that the tower doesn't fall over, or with the magnet tiles, making sure that the magnets attract each other so the tower stays up. So I can see different skills then being developed for them through the likes of construction based play. And my wee girl, she loves imaginative play and, like, role play type activities. So she's big into dressing up, big into playing doctors and nurses or teacher. And again, that's another brilliant way to develop skills. Like, you're acting out real life situations, you're developing your social skills, your conversational skills. You're learning about job roles. She's learning how to express herself, and she's developing wee interests and things as well. And even, like, her ability to make decisions. We play shop and things quite a lot too, so she's interacting with food, money. She's learning different things that way as well. So I think like play is like absolutely vital in terms of developing skills that we take for granted probably as adults, but that's how children learn, and that's how they are developing all those wee skills.
Grace, do you think it's important for us as adults, whether we are parents or professionals, to be aware of our own play preferences and biases? I know myself, I'm definitely cognitively biased, so I'm always going to go for, I love the board games, I love the construction play, and I do have to push myself to get creative and
Yeah.
relax and enjoy. So being aware of that and putting your attention into that area.
Absolutely, and I'm the same, Irene. Like I struggle a wee bit with the role play side of things. My wee girl absolutely loves it, but it's not me. Like I prefer creativity and mess. I love arts and crafts. I love Lego too, that construction based stuff. So I would have to push myself with that. But I think it's like about like acknowledging that you have a preference. Like it's the same with kids. Like people will say, "Oh, I can't get them to do jigsaws," or "I can't get them to do Lego." They're not interested in it. That's okay. It's just thinking about other ways of incorporating, similar activities, or make it more engaging for them. Maybe base it around their wee special interest or something, so that it is more engaging for them and that they're still ticking the boxes in terms of developing skills, but you're following their lead. Because I think you're totally right. Like we all have preferences as to what we like and don't like. And I would have to, if I asked my little girl what she wants to do as an activity, 9 times out of 10, it's can we play shop or can we play restaurant? And I set aside time and we do it because that's her thing. But I do struggle with it because it doesn't come naturally to me. So yeah.
I can really hear the benefit of play, and really important for parents to engage in some form of play with their children. I wonder, particularly for working parents, that can be draining as well. It can be exhausting to actually get down and find the time to play with kids, particularly after a busy day at work. Do you have any kind of tips or any ideas how can parents do it in a way that isn't too exhausting, or how can they fit it into their busy schedule?
Yeah, I think like that's something that I hear a lot, and especially within the wee ones that I see for one-to-ones, it's the time element. I feel really, really passionately about play, and like I always say to parents, like look at how you're spending your time. Like we do spend. I'm guilty of it too. Far too much time on phones and on screens watching TV and things. So what I would say to busy parents is, and like I am a busy parent myself, set aside like 15 minutes a day. It's not like a big chunk of time where you have like completely uninterrupted time with your child. And if you've two children, you do 15 minutes each. Some kids will love playing together, but if they're like mine, they very much like their alone time with mummy. So like literally 15 minutes a day where you have the phone down, the TV's off, and it's an activity that your child chooses. So it's something that they enjoy doing, and you're very much following their lead. And I think like I have noticed a massive difference since I've started doing that after school with my own kids, in terms of like they're far more regulated. Our relationships are better. There's less meltdowns. There's less frustration coming through because they feel like they're being listened to. And I think it's really important, particularly when children are at school, during the school year, because there's so many demands being placed on children in school. And homes are a wee safe space. And quite often children will ask you to play with them, and that's their way of like inviting you into their world. And that's whenever you might hear, what has happened today, or they might role play out something that went on. And it's just time for them and you to be together. So I would say that's probably my first wee tip would be that. But the other thing is you can do like really playful things very easily in your own wee routine. So some wee things that I would say are like use bath time as your playtime. So like you're doing it anyway. add in like a wee funnel, some wee jugs, maybe, do you know, the crazy foam soap that you can get in Home Bargains, anything just to make that experience more playful for the child. That's another lovely way, you know, if you don't have time to sit down and physically play, you're doing bath time anyway, so make it playful. And even like very simple things like, do you know, before dinner time, sometimes we would have a dance off, just like 2 minutes, put on a song, Taylor Swift, Shake It Off, and dance. And you know what? It actually does so much for you as an adult as well, you know, in terms of like releasing those endorphins and like making you feel good, and you'll feel a lot more connected to your child. So those would probably be my like top tips in terms of like trying to incorporate play really easily into your day, because like I get it, people are so busy, and you can be a wee bit frazzled after a whole day at work and at school, but I think like you're guaranteed to feel better if you spend like that wee bit of time playing. And like it's so important for adults as well to have time to play. You know, we don't do it enough.
I think, yeah, you've made that point definitely, Grace, that it's regulating for the child, but it most definitely is regulating for us as the adults too, whether it's sensory play or imaginative play. It's making that time
Yeah,
and takes that guilt and pressure away, doesn't it?
I think that's it. Yeah.
Grace, some of your ideas and structured play and sensory play that you share on social media is so visually appealing. Can you share where you get your inspiration from? Just if a parent can't access some of the classes that you offer, or that they can't, there isn't anything locally in their communities, how could they set up something individual for their child at home?
Yeah, well, I take a lot of inspiration off Instagram, off other accounts and people doing similar things. But one of my biggest inspirations is the children that I see. So whether that's a group or an individual themselves, like if a child has a special interest, you're guaranteed I'm going to base it around that interest. You can probably see behind me there's a lot of dinosaurs in our house. That has always been a massive special interest here. So growing up, the kids' sensory play setups or even Lego different things have always been based around dinosaurs. So what I would say is follow your child's lead primarily. Um, think about what you have at home. Like sensory play doesn't have to be complicated. And I think we can like see a lot of accounts where things are very manicured, very photo perfect. I'm guilty of that as well, because I like that's my creative outlet. Like on a day-to-day basis, if you're setting up sensory play at home, think about what you have in the house. So the likes of cardboard boxes, toilet roll tubes, kitchen roll tubes, you know, like boxes with lids, Chinese containers, all of those things, and even like loose parts. So wee bits and pieces like buttons and pom poms, or bottle lids off the milk carton. The wee pouches that you get baby food in, all of those are amazing for setting up sensory play, and like you will be amazed at how your child plays with those things. Um, and one of the things that I would do quite a lot too is taking kids outside. So big fan of nature in terms of sensory play as well. Take them out in a nature walk and gather whatever you have in your garden. You know, whether that be sticks, twigs, leaves, conkers in the autumn, and create play based around that. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be all singing and all dancing. That's one of the easiest ways to look at what you actually have in the house. Um, some other ideas for home would be things like your sensory bins. So like a big box, like a big storage container. And I would like say to parents, you know, fill that up with dry rice or dry pasta. Add in some pom poms. You can dye it if you want to make it more visually appealing, but you don't have to. And that'll keep for months. Just change it up every couple of weeks, you know, add in, if they're into Peppa Pig one week, add in wee Peppa characters. And you can add in like fine motor scoops into that, or spoons to work on their fine motor skills at the same time. If they're into dinosaurs the next week, add in dinosaurs, play hide and seek with it. It'll amaze you. I always say to parents, like, what your child will do, they'll play far more independently, and they'll play for a far longer length of time if there's a sensory component to the play, you know, rather than a toy that just does one thing, you know, a toy that maybe makes a noise, or, you know, a car that drives along. If you can keep things more open ended for them, they'll play much better independently, and it'll prolong the amount of time they play for too. So those would be the kind of resources I would look at home to make things easy for parents. I also always say to parents, if you are doing like a wee sensory setup or a tough tray or that, involve your child in it always, like follow their lead and their interests, or even involve them in what you put into the tray, whether it's oats or cereal, or they're more likely to engage with it as well. And also leave it out for the duration of the day. So if initially, like I'll hear parents all the time saying to me too, like, my child won't play with it, they're not interested, leave it out. They might not play with it initially, but they might come back to it like in 2 or 3 hours time. You'll see them playing with it. It can take a wee while just to get used to sensory play too. And sometimes we have to role model and show our children what to do, or how they can play with it, because they don't always naturally go for it. But yeah, I think I went off on a bit of a tangent, but hopefully I answered that
I think
question.
that's really helpful, Grace, though, because sometimes you are trying really hard to engage the child, to engage your child, to get some kind of reaction, and like they look at something for 2 minutes and then they're off, and they're not wanting to do something. Or I guess the other thing to bring in and to acknowledge is the kind of attraction of iPads and screens as well for children, and that can be a little bit of a draw away from maybe some other types of play. But you're saying leave things out and give it time.
Yeah, definitely. Like there won't always, especially if it's not something that you're already doing like regularly, it's new to them. Um, they need the time and the space to figure it out and to explore it, and to come around it. Like one wee boy that I had, number blocks was his thing. I could tell you everything about number blocks. So like sessions were always themed around that, and like I would have been printing resources, cutting them out, laminating them, buying all the number blocks toys. But it was amazing how, like whenever you added that into sensory play, how long he would play with it and how interested he was. And then he learned from that as well. That was a good way to he was going into P1 and then P2, so it was a good way as well for working on like numbers and math skills and different things.
What about if you have a child who has sensory processing challenges or additional needs, and some sensory play is really difficult? Is there any kind of advice for parents on how to support children with sensory processing through play?
Yeah, so just like every child, very much follow your child's lead. Um, Take a wee bit of time to observe them and to figure out what their sensory preferences is. Like you might have a child that is very sensitive to textures or to tactile input, that doesn't like their hands being messy and that doesn't like dirt being on their hands. So for children like that, I would always say start with a drier texture first, the likes of oats or dry cereal, something very dry, before you would ever think about introducing like gloopy textures or jelly or anything like that. And it might take a very long time before you ever will introduce something like that. So it's about just constantly observing the child and watching how they interact with things. I would also say to always have like a range of scoops or bowls or things that they can interact with the sensory play bases with without having to touch them, so that it's very safe and controlled. If they can still enjoy it, they can still play with it, but they don't have to put their hands right in it. Inadvertently, some of it might go in their hands. And that's a process too, about gradually introducing textures and getting them desensitized to things. But if you do it very gradually and add in loads of scoops and tongs and things, it's much safer and it feels happier for them as well. Um, you might have a child that is very sound sensitive. So again, it's just thinking about what you're using. The likes of pasta and rice in a metal container, for example, could be way too much for that child. So just think about the different bases that you're using, talk to your child, and just very much observe how they are getting on. In my classes, I would always have like a wee cam corner, and again, that's something you can do very easily at home or in school as well. I use a pop-up tent, and it's very, very basic what's in it. I have like a sensory light, a weighted lap pad, some ear defenders, and 1 or 2 fidgets. But that's a safe space that the child knows that if they are starting to feel, I talk about frazzled, because that's how my children would describe it. If they're starting to feel frazzled, they can take themselves away to the wee sensory tent and help themselves to regulate before they come back to it. And a few other wee things I would do is like incorporate lots of movement as well. So you might have your wee sensory set up there, but I always offer like lots of opportunities for movement. There's always a peanut roll in the sensory play classes. There's always sensory tiles to encourage jumping. There's a tunnel to encourage crawling. Just different wee ways to help them regulate their wee sensory systems, because it can get overwhelming, particularly for children that have sensory challenges. And some other wee things that you can do too is, like, I would use visuals in some of the classes as well to support it, so that they can see what's on the tray. And I would also always have like a wee ingredient list and things like that as well to accompany it. Or sometimes I would send out like a wee social story about what to expect from a class, just to help prepare that child for what's coming next. I would also have some kids that would come to sessions that would have significant physical disabilities, would be wheelchair users or have restricted mobility. So it's thinking about things then that you can bring up to their height, so they're not going to be on the floor with a tough tray. You might be using like wee smaller trays that can be sit on their wheelchair trays, or thinking about sensory play as more than just messy play. So it doesn't have to be messy. I would use ribbons, musical instruments. We would do a lot of dancing, different textured bean bags and things like that. Just getting more creative with it, just to help them.
Grace, could you finish off with a nice success story or memorable experience from your work with Sensory Submarine that highlights the impact of play on a child's development?
Yeah, I think whenever I was thinking about this one, there's one wee boy that really stands out for me. He's 3 and has really, really complex medical needs. So he has a trachea and he's ventilated as well. And I suppose most of his wee life has been spent in hospitals, running to appointments, lots of medical interventions. He has a rare genetic condition. But his mummy first approached me looking to play, literally just looking one-to-one play sessions with him, something that was totally different because their whole life was medicalised essentially. So we started off by doing one-to-one sessions, and each session was themed. He communicates mainly through Macathon, so I've been learning Macathon on the side as well. We started off doing those sessions, and the joy that brought the mummy and the wee boy was amazing. Loads of it was about giving her ideas to do at home. She has another wee girl who's just a year older, so it was also about providing them with opportunities to play together and giving them ideas for like sensory play activities that they could do together. So like that has been like the most fulfilling bit of my job, I think. It actually then has moved on now to, he has been able to participate in our groups for the last few months, which has been amazing, because this is a child who isn't able to go to preschool and isn't able to go to traditional settings because his medical needs are so high. But he's been able to come to our groups, which is amazing, and his mum and dad have both come along, his little sister's come along, and it's just somewhere where they can play together. It's completely safe. We can adapt all of the activities to suit his needs, and it's been lovely to see him being able to socialise as well and to meet other kids that are his age, because it's not something that they have been able to do before now. So that's probably the thing that has touched me the most and made me value what I do the most over the last wee while.
Thank you so much, Grace. That sounds like a really positive outcome. And, you know, I love the idea that somebody is even just coming to look for a little bit of support or a play, and it can completely transform the family and the relationships that they have. So really, really positive. Your social media channel is Sensory Submarine?
I'm on Instagram and Facebook, but mainly Instagram. I have a website as well, www.thesensorysubmarine.com.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience, Grace. Thank you for joining us on the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really enjoyed it. And I'm honoured, as I said, to be asked.
That's all for today's episode on the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast. We hope you enjoyed our discussion and found it informative and engaging. If you've any questions or comments, we would love to hear from you. You can email us at irishotpodcast@gmail.com or connect on Instagram or Facebook.
And remember to subscribe to our podcast so that you never miss an episode. If you found this episode helpful, please leave us a review on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback is important and helps us to improve the show, so please do leave it. Thank you for listening to the Irish Occupational Therapy Podcast, hosted by myself, Jen Trachak.
And myself, Aileen Rutledge.
We look forward to sharing more insights and knowledge with you in future episodes. Until then, take care.